But first, from Ottawa County, County Clerk Justin Roebuck, and from Kent County, Lisa Postumus-Lyons, County Clerk from Kent. The reason I asked you to come back, and we scheduled this months ago when we did the one before the primaries, is because there is nothing more important in this election, I don't care who you vote for, than people understanding the integrity and security and safety of the election. And because of events that have occurred over the past couple of election cycles, it has called all of that into question, while you and 81 of your counterparts have done everything you can to reassure folks. I feel like it's my responsibility to once again talk about these things so people know. So we're going to go through this for what you guys is a day-to-day routine, but people don't vote every day of the week. People forget from 2 years to 2 years, or some people don't vote every 4 years, and we've had some changes. So let's begin. Lisa, I'm going to begin with you. Registration in the state of Michigan is easier than it has ever been because of procedures that have changed. You can go register right now, or you can register at 1 o'clock on election day. Not a great idea, by the way, but talk about being prepared, starting with the very basics of registration.
Bottom line, if you want to vote, you've got to be registered. And Michigan is a same day voter registration state. So that means our voters can go and they can register at any point up until the election. We always want to encourage voters to register, way in advance. But if you're one of those procrastinators, which I can appreciate, you can go to your local clerk's office within, any time from 14 days up through election day. That's when you go to your local clerk, city or township. Then you register right there. You'll be given an opportunity to cast an absentee ballot there, or you will be given, a registration receipt where you can go to your own polling location and cast your ballot. Voter registration is also automatic when our citizens have in transactions at the Secretary of State. If you're getting a new license, if you're changing that license, you're automatically going to be registered to vote unless you opt out. There's different ways our voters can get registered. You can do that online. You can do that through the mail. You can do that in person. When you're online, you've got to have your state ID number or your driver's license number or your last 4 digits of your Social Security number.
What about residency? What about ID? What you talked about a state ID or a driver's license number, Social Security number. How long do I have to be in my residence in order to be registered to vote in that precinct?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so Michigan still has a 30-day residency requirement for voter registration, but if you've recently moved and just haven't updated that process, there are a lot of ways, as Lisa was just saying, to do that. And I think, step number 1 in that voting plan is voter registration. But it is so important to have a plan. And one of those elements of having a plan to vote is if you're voting in person, you will be asked for your photo ID. So in Michigan, it is a requirement of us to ask you for a photo ID. If voters don't have a photo ID, they can go through a process where they essentially sign some documentation. As long as they're on the poll book, and the address that they put on their application to vote matches what is in the poll book and they're a registered voter, they can still proceed and vote. But always a great idea to make sure that you bring your photo ID with you when you actually go in to vote early or in the precinct.
If you don't have that ID and you're still allowed to vote, does that become a provisional ballot?
Good question. No, actually, so Michigan's law, and which is now enshrined in our state constitution, the voter, again, they are eligible to cast that ballot if their address on the application to vote matches what's in the poll book. So that's really important. You still have to be registered, still have to sign that legal document, but basically you're signing an affidavit saying, I'm not in possession of photo ID, but I am who I say I am, and I'm casting a ballot. And that is a really small percentage of Michigan voters. I think the statistic in 2020 was somewhere around 0.0019% of voters in the state of Michigan in that presidential election used the option of the affidavit instead of photo ID.
Which is good, because that shows that people are paying attention and showing up with the right documentation. One of the reasons we're doing this show right now, and in full transparency, we're taping this on a Friday afternoon, because starting this weekend, we'll start getting absentee ballots out, first to military overseas and serving elsewhere, and then a few days later that no reason absentee ballot goes out. Now, we've been doing this for a while, and I think people are more used to it. Many people are already on that permanent list where they automatically get absentee ballots. But tell me about that process a little bit, about how you get on the absentee list, if you want to do that every time, or if you just want to do it this time because you're going to be gone or you're going to be busy.
Sure. You know, like you said, it's about time to start voting. So that's why it's important to make a plan. You mentioned our military and overseas ballots are going out on the 21st, which is Saturday. And then throughout next week, you'll start seeing the absentee ballots for those who have been on the permanent absentee voter list, that automatic ballot list, or anybody who has sent in an application. If you're not on that automatic ballot list, you can still vote absentee. What you have to do is fill out an application, and you're going to sign that application. When you send the application into your local clerk's office, they're going to verify, they're going to check your signature on the application against the signature we have on file in the qualified voter file in our voter list before they even issue that absentee ballot. If the signature matches, they're going to issue and mail out that absentee ballot to you. Once you, you know, some people vote right away and they send it in. You can, postage is paid, so you can send it in the mail. You can put it in a secure and monitored drop box, or you can drop it off in person at the clerk's office. But some people hang on to those ballots. If you get down to the wire where we're, you know, a week or 10 days before the election, I always recommend you drop it off in person or put it in a secure absentee ballot drop box. You know, it's really critical. We want, you know, we want to make sure that your ballots arrive by the time the polls close on Election Day at 8 p.m. When you do return your absentee ballot, you must make sure that you've signed your signature on the back of that absentee ballot envelope, because before it's accepted and ready to be tabulated, the clerk is again going to verify that that signature on the envelope matches the signature we have on file. If for some reason you forgot to sign the back of the envelope, the clerk is required. They'll notify you, and you've got 3 days to cure that absentee ballot signature.
Justin, 2 questions.
Yeah.
One is, and I'll give them both to you at once, and you can respond. One is, I want to know how this rule, this no reason absentee, has changed your job as a county clerk, because it is kind of wholesale change. I mean, before you had to have some kind of a reason. It wasn't terribly hard to get an absentee ballot,
Sure.
but by taking off any restrictions on that, I'm sure it must have changed the way you get ballots. But here's maybe the biggest question. I cast my absentee ballot a week from today, and something happens, and I don't want to vote for John Smith anymore. I just voted for John Smith, but John Smith just said something I don't like. Am I out of luck?
Yeah, 2 great questions. I mean, yes, absolutely. Absentee voting has expanded and given Michigan voters obviously a lot more choice, and it's certainly resulted in a change in how our election process works in a sense because of the volume that we're receiving, right? I mean, absentee voting is nothing new. We've been doing it here in Michigan since the Civil War. But the fact of the matter is that our laws changed in 2018, and really the next major election cycle we had was 2020, which was a pandemic year. It was a kind of a sea change for how people participated in that process. And a lot of folks said, you know what, this is it's a convenient way of voting. Again, as Lisa was pointing out, a lot of security and process checks go into that. And so it's a very secure method of voting as well. But we do have that issue sometimes, right, where things are dynamic in the political landscape. And
we were talking about that just
voters,
before we started. It's like, what's the last big thing that's going to happen in the election, right?
Right. I mean, voters can change their mind. Things can happen, right? And you do have the option to spoil an absentee ballot by going into your local clerk's office. And I believe it's a second Friday previous to the election now. So our laws have changed and shifted a little bit there as well, because processing of absentee ballots can begin earlier now under Michigan law than before. So you'll want to do it, you know, at least a couple of weeks prior to the election to give yourself that added, you know, room and flexibility. But you can go actually into the clerk's office. It has to be in writing, a request to spoil essentially your absentee ballot, and you can re-vote a new ballot. Of course, the clerk will spoil the old one.
You just brought up something that I hadn't thought to talk about, but I think it's important, because you said those early ballots can be processed,
Yeah.
not tabulated, right?
Well, actually, the law has changed to allow for the tabulation, not release of results. Very important to note that we're not releasing any results.
So you will
ever,
go ahead and have those ready to go. So at 8 o'clock, those numbers will pop up first, right?
Jurisdictions can decide. So our municipal clerks, our city and township clerks all across the state of Michigan, they know their communities best. They know the volume of absentee ballots they're looking for and looking to receive. And they are making that decision as to how many days early they process ballots. But effectively, it helps the process significantly in terms of getting those results in a timely fashion, and allows us to be ready to release results
And
earlier.
let's remember too, not only do we have so many checks and balances throughout the whole process, but we also have such transparency. There's so many opportunities for the public to come and observe how the process is going down. And so if those jurisdictions are processing and tabulating absentee ballots prior to Election Day, voters have the ability, the public has the ability to observe that. We want to ensure accountability. We want to ensure the integrity of the election. So if that's going on, it's going to be public information, and the public is certainly invited and welcome to watch that unfold. But truly, and because we've got those measures in place, I think bottom line is it's going to help ensure that we have results to our candidates, our campaigns, the media, and most importantly, our voters. We're going to have those results much sooner than we used to.
And I would argue actually better in some ways for transparency, because we're not, organizations aren't having to invite their observers down, to the counting board at 2 in the morning. They can come at maybe Monday at 10, and that is publicly posted, and it's obviously transparent, open to the public.
We're going to talk more about that and how people can kind of observe both during the election and prior to the election. We'll do all of that when we come back to The Point. Welcome back to The Point. Our guests are two county clerks from Ottawa and Kent County, and we appreciate you being here. I want to talk to you a little bit about something that's relatively new, and that's the early in-person voting. And Justin, let's start with you. It looks different in different jurisdictions because each jurisdiction can decide how they want to do it. It's not practical to have all of your precincts open for 9 days prior to Election Day. So in Ottawa County, how does it work?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's absolutely right. I mean, this is a part of the makeup of how decentralized our election process is in Michigan. But in Ottawa County, our early voting process is a joint collaboration between the county and local clerks. We have 4 vote centers, and they're sort of geographically split up. You can find out more at miottawa.org/early voting. But 4 centers where anyone within the county who lives anywhere in the county can go to any vote center and cast a ballot during the 9 days prior to the election. So obviously for us, that begins October 26th and then winds up through the Sunday prior to the November 5 election. And so, I think we've done this experiment basically with our local clerks in a sense to say to our voters, like, this is one kind of uniform process. Everyone knows the same dates, the same times. It's a financial, cost-saving measure for us as we process our early voting. And I think it's good to be on the same page when it comes to these things, but also there's other ways of doing it and other ways of collaborating that are certainly happening in other places. And so we're excited about it, and I think we're excited to offer this to our voters and see where this goes for November. Obviously, in August and in February, this is a pretty low turnout.
Yeah, I was going to ask, that was my kind of my follow-up question, because in Kent County you do it differently, but in total this is still a pretty small fragment of the voters that are using that. At least it has been.
It certainly is. As Justin mentioned, there are different ways each county is operating, and there's pluses and minuses to both, to different approaches. In Kent County, each one of our local jurisdictions, each of our cities and townships are going to be operating their own early voting sites for their own voters. We just felt at this time, Michigan is a decentralized election state, and so continuing in that vein, especially with this kind of first go-round, we really don't know what to expect, don't have a baseline for who's voting early, who and where are they coming from that are voting early. So we really wanted to get that baseline established. And again, also, the point of the early voting was to have convenience for our voters, and we felt like not only is it more convenient for our voters to go to their township, their own early voting site, but really it's what the voters know, so we feel like that's where the voters should go.
So, just to be clear, if you're going to vote early, there's a fair possibility, maybe better than average, that you won't be voting in what you expected to be your normal precinct, right? So you're going to go somewhere else, but your vote still counts. Then on election day, voting will change back to your normal precinct. So just so people aren't confused. As a practical matter, and you point out there's no baseline, is this something you expect to increase over time, or do we just not know?
Most definitely. In fact, I don't think the numbers really could get lower. Early voting is a lot of effort, it's a lot of expense, and we really didn't see a lot of participation. We had 3% of the people who participated in the August election. Only 3% of them utilized early voting as their method. So it would be very frustrating given all the work that it entails. But again, this is what the voters chose. This was their decision. This is a method they said they want that opportunity, that ability. So we're going to do that. We're going to step up. And again, it's new. So I can only imagine that as time goes on, as this becomes more of a regular part of our election process, you're going to start seeing many more voters utilize the method.